Thanks for tuning in to Stay Sharp with Razorleaf, your secret weapon for all things digital and manufacturing. In this episode, Jonathan Scott and Jen Ferello take a look at what makes an enterprise model-based. They break down the many acronyms around all the concepts for model-based, like MBD, which often references model-based design, but can also be a reference for model-based definition, and they are very different things. This episode will help you better understand the different concepts and acronyms associated with model-based and prepare your organization for this shift that is happening across engineering and production teams and manufacturing organizations. Let's tune in with Jen and Jonathan.
Hey, welcome back to Stay Sharp, our podcast where we're talking about all things digital related to products and manufacturing. I am here with my colleague, Jonathan Scott.
Hi, everybody.
And today we are dipping back into our alphabet soup of acronyms for another spoonful.
I love it.
You're just hungry, aren't you?
I am.
MBE is another term that we hear frequently. In fact, I just read actually that some of Deloitte's research estimated that 85% of enterprises across industries are undertaking initiatives to bolster their MBA capabilities. 85%.
That's fun. I wonder, is that like when you say 85% across industries, like, are they talking about like healthcare and finance too, or just even in the area we talk about with like product digitalization stuff?
I think it's probably, they didn't specify, but if I had to guess, it's probably product digitalization. Okay. So, but
it's still
across
a big
industries
number.
Like, aerospace, defense, heavy machinery, medical devices, et cetera. So that's what I'm kind of assuming. But 85%, that's big.
That is.
So it's a term we hear a lot, but again, there's so many people mean so many different things by it, right? So today we're going to be talking about what is a model-based enterprise. We're going to start with where the term actually started, what it's kind of grown to, and what we feel really qualifies an enterprise as model-based.
Yeah, I think that's the great point to get to, Jen, right? Is what makes an enterprise model-based? And I don't know, there may not be a definitive answer to that, but let's try and answer the question, right? But by getting into some of the things that you mentioned and starting with where did all this come from? What's this model-based thing about? Why did we even get down this road?
Well, the first time I really heard model-based, it was model-based design, right? So you're moving from 2D drawings being the definitive source of information to a 3D model, actually having all the GD&T, all the machining, basically capturing all of the information necessary to create the model.
Well, I think there was even an interim step, I'll say, which is before you had all of the GD&T and PMI, and boy, we should, since we're getting into alphabet soup already, we should even say what some of those mean. So the geometric dimensioning and tolerancing, that's the GD&T, and the PMI, product manufacturing information. Yeah?
Yeah.
Before we got that stuff in the model, there was the step where we were just using 3D geometry in a 3D model file to be the basis of the 2D drawing we would make, right? So CAD packages back, I don't know, you say this is even maybe in the 80s, when we started 3D modeling, they said, all right, well, I'll make a 3D model that mathematically, computationally in the computer represents the geometry, and then I'll ask the computer to kind of make me 2D views of that on a 2D digital space. And then I'll go plot my dimensions, my notes, my tolerances, all that stuff on top of it. And that it feels like where we started. But people are like, oh yeah, it's a faster way to make drawings. It was a better way than using the drafting board, and using a computer makes it easier to edit, all that stuff. So that's to me, that's the first step. And then we get to what you just mentioned, which is when you can start calling it MBD and actually put that design data all in the 3D model, right?
Right. So you're basically going from, like I said, going from the drawing being the definitive source to the model itself. So it's model-based design. The model is the definitive source of truth as far as all the things go, whether it's views, manufacturing data, GD&T, et cetera. So,
and that's a great place to pause and talk about maturity for a second, right? Because in terms of at least how I view the industry today, that first piece of, well, I make a 3D model file and I make a 2D drawing from it, I would argue we're pretty mature on that one. Most people are doing that, but not everybody still, right? There are lots of folks out there still doing 2D CAD design for the things that they make. Certain industries are better or further ahead than others, but that one pretty well accepted. That next step you mentioned, right? Oh, the 3D model is where all my design information is, all the dimensions, GD&T, all that stuff. I think we're still early days on that one. I don't know. What do you see?
No, I agree with you entirely. It's one of those things. I've been watching my entire career and thinking, okay, drawings are dead. Okay, no, really, drawings are no, still
Nope.
no. But I think and it's funny because that's where I think 3D PDF fills a real gap because it is both. Like it's 2D, but you can also click on the model, you can spin it around, you can see all the different views. So it's kind of the intermediate step.
That's a great indicator, I think, of where we are, right? To your point, is people are still paying a lot of attention to the bridging technologies that are getting us from 2D drawings to 3D models as the real definition of a product. So things like 3D PDF. And I'll give you another example. I was just, I had led a webinar with a partner of ours. We were talking about model-based enterprise. And from the manufacturing perspective, one of my co-presenters brought up the fact that, when we started to move away from drawings, we really lost something. And it made us talk about this 3D PMI rat's nest concept. I mean, I know we're on a podcast, so I'll have to ask everybody to kind of use your imagination and visualize. But when you put all those dimensions in GD&T on a 3D model, it kind of makes it look like a rat's nest or a cloud of text, right? Because you've got the 3D geometry in the middle and all these annotations, notes, dimensions, whatever, hanging off of it. They just kind of create this cloud of mess you can't read. Well, and the answer for a lot of folks is you generate views that are 2D sort of little snapshots of certain dimensions, certain notes turned on. And so you can kind of walk somebody through by saying, look at first view A, look at view B, view C, view D. And that's what 3D PDF does, right? Is it does let us do that. We've got the 3D in there, but we give people kind of a view or a portal into a certain perspective on it to help manage all that information and make it useful. But I thought it was interesting. That tells us something about where we're at. We're not ready for total 3D. 2D still got some use to us. We're getting there, right?
Right. No, you're right. Matter of fact, there's a whole host of products out there that create those. I mean, as a matter of fact, SolidWorks MBD actually creates. It goes through and creates that 3D PDF and other viewables, but basically takes that model and then creates the 2D views of it.
Right.
And allows you to view it that way. So yeah, you're right. We're still in the interim for sure.
But we're getting in the right direction because that product you mentioned, right, and a lot of the other products that help out in that area today, what they're doing though is they're using the GD&T that's in the model instead of recreating it, duplicating effort, creating another copy somewhere else, right? And that's one of the things that this whole model-based thing is promising to us. The idea, I think, is we put information in a model one place, and then we reuse that information other places instead of duplicating it. And that's what we hate about documents to start with, right? Is we make copies of information in this document, that document, the other document, and then it gets out of sync. And we've got duplicate data, and we don't know if we're looking at the latest thing, and, right?
Right. No, you're exactly right. That's one of the biggest challenges. Anytime you have redundant data is how do you make sure that they are synced? And how do you make sure that you have the latest and greatest?
So that's, I think, what people, at least what I'm hoping we get in the model-based world as we become more model-based is you put information in a model, whether it's 3D or whatever kind of model we might be talking about, and then you reuse it, you share it, you connect to it, and you don't duplicate it because that does avoid problems with, quality. Oh yeah, I've got a summary of that information over here, but I got all the details over there. Okay. Which one should I be looking at? For what use? For what purpose? Et cetera. And version things, right? Well, this is what it was 5 weeks ago. This is what it was 3 weeks ago. This is what it is today. And guess what? It'll be something different tomorrow. Well, am I looking at the right one? Some of these things about single, source of truth, or another term I like, authoritative source of truth. Models can help make a lot of that clear. So yeah, I totally agree.
By the way, I like the authoritative source of truth because I don't know that we'll ever get to single source. That's probably a whole nother podcast, actually.
I think it is.
So basically that's where we started, right? We started with model-based design and, creating the 3D model itself and basically packing it full of information. going past that, and this is kind of like we had another podcast where we talked about how IDE, the term IDE, has gone from integrated development environment to integrated digital environment. So now MBD, which really started as model-based design, I think has expanded beyond that to model-based definition, where it's not just the design itself, but once you start reusing it downstream, because that was the whole purpose, well, one of the major purposes anyway, of model-based design is to be able to reuse that model downstream. So it's not, you're getting bigger than just the design. You're getting into the definition of the product, which includes things like manufacturing and quality and analysis, simulation, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Now, I'll poke at your language there for a minute because I find this very interesting. MBD, all right, model-based design or model-based definition or both? And what does that mean? And you laid out a very clear delineation, right? That MBD, model-based design, is that 3D CAD information, PMI, GD&T definition of the product. And then when you start to expand that and talk about everything you need other places, that's when it becomes model-based definition. I'll tell you, I don't see that clarity out in the market and the industry. I hear people using those terms interchangeably all the time and not being able to differentiate. And I don't know, I'm probably in that camp. I struggle with saying where does one thing end and another of those start? But I don't think it's critical to get the labels right just yet. As long as we know the concept we're talking about, to me, that's what's important. And you hit on a key concept, which is what other information about the product needs to be captured, right? What information from maybe other domains, other uses of the information. And so I'm going to dive into one that I think is maybe the oldest one that I know of. And I shouldn't say oldest because I'm sure somebody would argue that and they'd give me a counterexample. But to me, one of the most mature ones is when we first got a 3D model back in the time frame I was talking about where we could make 2D drawings off of 3D models because we dropped the 2D views, et cetera. One of the really early applications of that 3D model is, I think, in aerospace, folks in manufacturing were saying, hey, I've got this machine tool out in the shop that I can control with a computer, and I can program it to cut the tool paths based on computer programs. And if you've got a 3D model of the part, I could use your 3D geometry to drive my 3D tool paths, and then that will make the machine tool cut repeatably, effectively. I can program it, I can control it, all these great benefits in manufacturing if I could reuse that 3D model. And that's like, whoa, all of a sudden the lights came on and things glowed and everybody's like, this is amazing, because they could reuse that 3D geometry for a totally different purpose. But it got us to that authoritative source of truth thing, right? Now, I won't say that all these computer and technology tools worked perfectly at the beginning, but the promise of it was great. If I make an edit to the 3D geometry, if I add a notch or change a dimension or whatever, then I could go to that 3D cutting tool path on the machine tool and say, hey, you just need to update just that piece, right? How's that? Your cutting path associated back with the 3D model, because we want to share data and not recreate data. And so to me, that was an early opportunity to make use of a model in other places. And again, I don't know if that's model-based definition or not, right? I'm not sure if I've got the terms right, but that concept of sharing, to me, is one of the first places where we're talking about, yes, model sharing, model reuse, and that's one of the promises here.
Well, and I think it was not just one of the first examples, it was also one of the drivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's when you look at what you put into a model these days, a 3D model, it's not just the GD&T, it's also machining. What process are you choosing to do some of the machining? So there's a lot of things that I think drove the creation of the model-based design.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are a couple of machinists I know who would tell me I was wrong. And actually, it's 3D models didn't come out of engineering, they came out of manufacturing, right? And that makes sense because there were likely mathematical shapes that they needed to cut with machine tools and tool paths they needed to create, that the only way to define them was through 3D math, right? I mean, and complex mathematical stuff. And they said, well, to do that, I need a 3D model. And so it went back the other direction, right? Manufacturing is what caused us to have 3D models. So I don't know what the real history is, but I agree. I think there was a need on multiple sides that drove some of this. But if I'm getting the understanding correct, it is the reuse of the data. That's the important thing that gets us beyond model-based design. And it's also a proliferation of data. You touched on something a second ago I think is important. You can design the part to look one way, but you could actually, I don't want to use the word design, you could plan multiple manufacturing processes for getting to that result. Now you're starting to talk about a broader definition, right? So you could have one set of tool paths and use one set of CNCs and machines to create that part. And that's one definition of it, of making it. But today, you could print it. Oh, well, that's another definition of how to make that part. Okay. And on, right? It just expands and explodes from there, that there are lots of other things to capture in these models, right? Maybe a 3D printing model, maybe a CNC cutting path model that need to leverage back to that model-based design and connect to it and associate to it, but they're their own models of the manufacturing process.
And when we're talking about like chicken and egg sort of relationships, whether it's manufacturing that drove the design or vice versa, I can go back to the first company I ever worked for, ITI, was started by Jack Lemmon, and his goal was analysis leading design. Mm-hmm. Because I think analysis is another one. Like, okay, really needed the 3D model to do its best work, but then again, the analysis drives the design as well. It drives changes in the design. So
that's a great example, right? Because we, same thing. When I went to engineering school, I remember when we talked about doing force balance equations and all kinds of things where we were doing kinematics and dynamics and could just do math formulas to represent it, you quickly got to a point where they're like, well, but the real world gets so complicated, you need to use something called finite elements models. First things they taught us about finite elements were all 2D and still simplified. And then they expanded it out into 3D. And, and once we got there, it was very clear you needed 3D representations to do really interesting analysis and simulation. And to your point, and maybe another one where, well, I don't know, maybe it wasn't design that drove the need for 3D. Maybe it was analysis, and engineering simulation that drove back to why we had to 3D. That's another great area. And I think this gets us where we're really trying to go with this conversation is when you start talking about areas beyond design, whether it's manufacturing or it's engineering and analysis, or I'll throw in another one, quality. As another great example of where you want to reuse the model. Great, I've got a model, but there's some critical dimensions or characteristics I need to check. Okay, well, those are probably, they were in the MBD, the design piece, but how I'm going to check them, where I'm going to check them, what datums I'm going to use. Again, some of that's in the MBD, but some of it is how am I going to measure it? How am I going to inspect it? Those quality types of activities, that's yet another model, perhaps. And this is what's getting us to the enterprise, right? Now, we're not there yet, but that's all these different departments are kind of part of that picture.
And it's funny because when we were talking earlier about quality, you're putting a different spin on it than I actually was thinking about. And this is just the difference in our backgrounds. Because you're right, metrology and measuring it as built, et cetera, is very important. But I was actually thinking about just even comparing different models to make sure that, okay, what changes have been, basically validating that the models are the ones you want. So comparing did dimensions change from one version to another? Did the definition, like when you look at the analysis model and you look at the design model, what features changed? Did they remove fillets so that they could do the analysis? Did they, so things along those lines, checking the quality, validating, I guess would be a better way to put it, perhaps.
I think it's a great angle on quality, right? It's another point that's important. This was really important in the early days of 3D because we had different people had different representations of a 3D model. Right? And if you needed to translate from your design tool to your toolpath cutting tool, you needed to check and make sure that the translation happened properly. So, the quality of the data and the quality of the manufactured product. I mean, all those quality issues I think are relevant here. And you're just bringing up yet another angle. It's absolutely right. I think there are probably other places where even if we strayed from the 3D model concept for a minute, the concept of modeling is creeping into other areas of product development and product definition. Here's another example. Let's take a domain that's not mechanical. Electrical design, a lot of electrical design initially has been 2D based. I mean, at first it's actually logic based. And then it's 2D layouts of PC boards and layouts of chips and things like that. But it has a 3D element as well. I saw this maybe 20 years ago or so when it was, all right, I can manufacture a PC board or manufacture a chip, those kinds of things. But ultimately, it has to go into a mechanical design, and I end up with thermal failures because it gets too hot. Or I end up with clearance issues because it won't fit in the box it needs to go in, and those kinds of things. And this is where a largely 2D design world met with a 3D design world, and other domains like electrical started to need to have 3D and have other models. And when they did, even before they did, the modeling world in electrical design was such that you needed to represent something one place and then reuse it another. So I'll tell you what I mean. A component like a resistor or a capacitor, it's got a logical representation that says, oh, this is its resistance, and this is the quality on that resistance. And so that's going to get used in a mathematical model of a circuit. But it also needs a physical model. In a lot of cases, it was 2D, which is like a footprint. Well, how big is that? Where does it fit on a board? What kind of connections does it have? So that you'd know how to place it on a circuit board. And then there was yet another model, a 3D model, if you needed to make a 3D model of your circuit board because you wanted to do a heat simulation or something like that. But it's just another domain with a different way of modeling based on what was interesting about electrical design. But that's what we're seeing pop up again and again in all these different disciplines inside of engineering and other departments. So another example that I think is really hot right now, and I won't get too excited, Jen. I know you're probably thinking, geez, is he really going to keep going? I am.
No, I bet I know where you're going to go with this.
Model-based systems engineering.
Well, let's just not leave it at just electrical, right? How many devices, products, et cetera, don't have software these days?
Right.
If you're going to talk about MBSE, let's talk about software.
Absolutely.
How does that fit in?
And I think those are both good topics. So I want to touch on each of them.
Okay.
You knew I was going to get excited about this.
I did.
So, MBSE.
You're very predictable.
I am very predictable. Systems engineering has been a discipline for years, right? It's what's helped us get to the moon and do all kinds of amazing things as a society. But systems engineers are undergoing a huge transformation right now to model-based systems engineering because they realize that value of authoritative sources of information and leveraging data instead of recreating it. So MBSE is having a huge moment right now, and I'm very excited about that. But software is another one. And I'll tell you, this goes back to our MBD conversation earlier. When I did research on this years ago and was trying to sort out the meanings of the MBDs, there's an MBD in the software world too, which is modeling software like pseudocode, like UML, right? Things that represent the software before the software is actually written. So it's had its own moment with modeling and its own unique path on that. And I think we're going to see that. We're going to continue to see each discipline, each domain finding its way into a modeling world that works best for that domain, which is great, right? Because everybody's finding the tools that work for them, leveraging this important concept of information reuse, data reuse instead of data duplication.
Well, and I got to compliment you. If you said I introduced a new definition, if you will, a new concept to you, like bringing back an old one, like, wow, I had not thought about pseudocode as being software modeling, but you're exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah, that goes way back in my career. But before it, so we're talking about model-based definition now. And before we go on to model-based enterprise, which is our actual goal today, I don't want to leave out suppliers, right? Because there's very rarely does a company create soup to nuts the entire product. And a lot of times you're getting your suppliers' designs in as well. So whether that's designing, around your suppliers' products or designing for them, mating, et cetera, things like that. That's another thing that when we're talking about data reuse, both directions.
This is a place where I hear one of the big obstacles. I was part of a project probably 10 years ago with a customer of ours who was trying to move to model-based design specifically, right? 3D models, PMI, that kind of thing. And their biggest obstacle was about design partners and supply chain partners, right? They said, we could do it all internally. We could figure out all these changes. It's a big cultural change for us, getting all the engineers used to it, getting the people on the shop floor used to it. But we can do it. It's inside our four walls. Where they stopped was because they started going out to suppliers, people who were going to make parts for them, people who were going to design parts for them, folks who said, look, I can't do that. Or I can do that, but the price is 3 times what it normally is, right? So they would take a model for some component they wanted to make, and their purchasing folks would take it out to the machine shop that they normally had that made at, and they say, look, tomorrow we'd like to be giving you these parts as 3D models. Can you give me a quote for it? Is that going to work for you? And these folks would come back with things like, well, yeah, but I don't really know how to read all that, so I'm going to have to triple the price. And purchasing said, look, this is a non-starter. We can't do this, guys. So I think you're exactly right. Part of, and maybe we are getting into the enterprise conversation, part of an extended enterprise.
No, I mean, now I think you're right. We're moving into a model-based enterprise where it's beyond the design, it's beyond MBD, it is beyond the other MBD, model-based definition, because it's beyond reuse of the data. It's actually other models that drive your organization. And the supply chain models is definitely one of those. How are we going to interact with our supply chain? What are we going to give them? What are they going to give us? And that's, anytime you're going outside your organization, it's going to be challenging.
And it's blurry too, right? I mean, to your point, supply chain models. Okay, clearly that's enterprise or extended enterprise, right? As you're thinking about how you work with people, exchange data, those kinds of things. But here's one. Is this model-based definition or is this model-based enterprise? How about a cost model? Right? If you want to work with a partner like a priori and you want to estimate the cost of your part, or if you say you're not even using a third-party software like that, but you want to estimate the cost of your product through rolling up the bill of material costs, that cost model, right? And I'll argue it's a model because it's dynamic and you can change it and you might put some algorithms in it about how you roll up costs and how you put labor and materials and blah, blah, blah. So you've got that kind of model. I don't know. Is that model-based definition? I don't know. But again, I don't think it's critical. I don't think it matters, right? It's the concept is what's important. Putting information somewhere one time and reusing it.
Right. And I think that's kind of the dividing line here, right? It's not just the design model that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just that data. So I would argue maybe the a priori example is actually model-based definition. But when you're talking about cost modeling and going into resources and ERP, that is more model-based enterprise.
Okay. That's fair. I'll accept that. That makes sense to me. I mean, I think there are lots of other good models. I find this interesting to think about what other kinds of models there should be or could be in the enterprise to give us that perspective. So for example, that's still tied back to the product, sustainment models, maintenance models, service, repair bombs, service manuals, work instructions, things like that. Like, well, all right, yeah, we're leveraging the 3D models from design, but we are adding new content, which is, what is a spare part? What's a replacement part? What's the procedure for replacing that or repairing that in the field? That's new content. That's not, is it design? I don't know. I'm not sure that repair and service work is design. It is designed. Anyway, I'll stop. I won't go down that rabbit hole. But that whole world of sustainment, MRO, that kind of thing, there are models there. We've done some defense work where I am just fascinated with the logistical models, right? So, I've got a helicopter or an aircraft somewhere around the world. Well, what's my mean time between failures for a certain component, which tells me how many spares I need to have and how close those spares need to be. And of course, the world of additive manufacturing is changing so much of that and turning it upside down because you don't have to think about, well, how much do I have in the warehouse? What's my inventory? How close is it? How long does it take to fly it from the carrier to there? But that stuff is fascinating. Those are tremendous models which have huge importance in terms of the mission and objective that you're trying to meet with a helicopter or an airplane. But that's not MBD.
No.
That's another world entirely.
Yeah, that's clearly MBE. That's enterprise-wide. It's using models to drive how you execute your business.
Yeah. And here's another one we can't forget about, right? We had a good podcast I really enjoyed where we talked about what do you need to run a product-based business, right? And we were talking about business systems and all the different aspects of how you do that. Here's one that relates back to that. You can't do any of this digital product stuff we're talking about on this podcast if you don't think about money. So financial models, right? We talked about cost models a second ago, but what about financial models? How do you make money at your product Are you making it by selling it? Is it your product as a service? Oh, do you have distributors? What about partners, suppliers, all that stuff, right? Those financial models are critical and they influence so many product decisions. Why isn't that part of what we look at for a model-based enterprise, right? Because it's such a key piece of it.
Well, and I think it is. So that would be my argument, is that those kind of models are what you need to be considered a model-based enterprise. It's not just the design model and the reuse of the design model, because that's the foundation. That's a critical piece. But to be a model-based enterprise, the models themselves, not the design model, but the models themselves, whatever type model, that's what makes an enterprise.
Okay. So your argument would be you're modeling across different disciplines and domains, and however whatever your business is and whatever you need to run your business, you're using models to do those things, not just paper or even digital documents, but truly models. That's what you're getting at?
I am. Matter of fact, I might even go back, you could argue, based on that definition, that MBD is not necessarily where this started.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, kind of like your the caveman example with what is PLM.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a 3D model? Companies that don't make manufactured products probably still run off financial models.
Right. No, I think that's true. Here's another great example. You're making a product, but it's not a discrete product. You make something in the process industry like toothpaste. Well, the primary model you're interested in may not be 3D at all because, frankly, it's tough to look at 3D of toothpaste. But your recipe, there's your model, right? Your chemical models, your mixing models, your process models, those things. So I agree. I think we should be careful that, we come from this world. We've done a lot with 3D and discrete products and that kind of thing. But we shouldn't forget that the modeling concept doesn't always have to be 3D model based.
Right. No, I agree. And that's a new point for me. Like, honestly, that's a new realization as we're going through this conversation. That
I tell you what, though, I can't get away from mechanical, though. That's my background.
Well, that's
right?
Of mine as well. I get that. Well, and I think most of our listeners think like that too. But it's just an interesting point that just like you can have PLM without a PLM system, or you can be doing PLM without a PLM system, you can be an enterprise, a model-based enterprise without a model-based design.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think that's true. Although,
but you're right.
I want to propose my take on what makes an enterprise model-based. So I like what you said, right, about you're using models in the different domains or disciplines you have. I'm going to say, I think it has something to do with how you're replacing the way that you worked previously. And it may not necessarily be across all domains or disciplines in your company, but I think I'm going to get the source of this wrong, but the model-based maturity index, and I think it came out of the Department of Energy first, and I don't know, NIST may own it these days, but that concept of you can measure your maturity just on the MBD front, right, with some characteristics of how do you work. Do you still work from 2D paper-based drawings? Okay, you're at maturity level X. Do you use 2D CAD drawings, digital CAD, but it's still document and drawing based? All right, you're at maturity level Y. Do you use 3D models, but with 2D drawings? Do you use just 3D models, right? So that idea of what are you using? What's your sort of currency of communication or the way you share data, and measuring that maturity within these different aspects? I think that tells us something about whether your enterprise is model-based. But you have to look at it not just for MBD, right, and model-based design, and not just MBD, model-based definition, but across your business. But it's, to me, what makes an enterprise model-based is that they're shifting away from documents, away from even digital documents, but away from these false containers of information and using models that connect to each other and share information. That, to me, is what's making an enterprise model-based.
So it's both the breadth, if you will, the different departments that are model-based, and the depth, right? The maturity.
Right. I think of it, I'm going to throw in an IT concept here and say, to me, it's a little bit like normalization of a database. And for those that aren't familiar with it, the idea of normalizing a database is saying, look, I don't want to repeat any data in my database. I want to link it, right? So if I've got a customer address in a certain table, I don't want to have their state in another table, right? And have it duplicated where maybe something's out of sync. I want to make sure I just put the data in one column in one table and link to it. The same concept here. I want to have models that represent the data I need to run my business about my products, my finances, whatever it might be. But I want to have it one place and reuse it and connect to it. And I want to avoid the duplication. I want to normalize my operations using models. And that's that depth, I think. That's the ultimate goal that tells us how model-based an enterprise is.
Think we'll get there? Has anybody gotten there yet?
No way. No way. It's great, though. It's an aspirational goal, right?
It is an aspirational goal. I agree.
And I think it's this comes back to something we've talked about on other podcasts. What advice do we have for people as we're talking about this topic and thinking about it? And my advice is, yeah, it's aspirational, and you shouldn't do any of it for the sake of doing it. You should do it for the sake of what does it bring you? What benefit does it add? And so many of these things we've talked about are bringing you efficiency. They're saving you time. They're saving you money. They're avoiding waste and duplication. They're avoiding mistakes, errors. There are lots of tangible benefits that this stuff gets you. So I think it's great to have a goal and aspire toward it. But as you go to put it in place or try to implement it, each step along the way, you should ask, what's it doing for me? How's it helping?
Well, and a pertinent point there is each step along the way. Because
Right.
I think if you look at that aspirational goal and you think, oh my God, how am I going to get there? It's not one big leap, right? It's lots of small iterative steps, and it does build on one another.
Like the conversation where we started today, right? I mean, it starts maybe with MBD. If you're the kind of discrete product manufacturer that we know and work with a lot, sure. Can you do MBD? Well, are you even using 3D for your CAD? All right, a lot of people are. Great. Can you step from that to MBD? Can you use that model-based design in other aspects of your business, right? In manufacturing and quality and other areas, and there's your stepwise piece. Can you step through each of those things, adding value, bringing value to your business as you go in a way that says, well, I did that one. It worked. It helped. Now let's do the next one.
Right. But I think it's also a combination of both parallel and serial processing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because what you're describing there is serial, where you're moving through engineering and then through and beyond engineering, if you will.
Right.
Or beyond design. But also in parallel, taking the aspirational model for all of the different departments so that you're getting both that breadth and the depth.
Right. You're building in multiple areas at the same time. Like you said, parallelization. And you know what? This is funny because I think we're tying back to other topics on other podcasts that we've covered. But this brings up the point of transformation. We're talking about moving stepwise. Some people choose to skip steps, right? They say, look, I know I need to be there instead of, taking a baby step, taking a baby step, taking a baby step. I want to take one giant leap. That's tricky. It's not simple, but sometimes that's the right answer, right? Saying, I want to be fully model-based in manufacturing, quality, and engineering, even though I do, 2D drawings today. Okay. Well, if you know that's your goal and you see the benefits out of it and you can make a plan to get there, great. Take one big leap. But that's digital transformation, right? It's one way of looking at it.
That is true. Okay, so we started with model-based design, moved into definition, and finally enterprise, and then got, I think, a lot bigger perhaps, or a lot more defined in our concept of model-based enterprise than perhaps either of us thought about.
And even a little philosophical, but go figure. Shocking that I would do that. I think it's been good though, Jen. I mean, I think we have an answer to the question, is what makes an enterprise model-based is it's about usage of models. That's a simple way of putting it. And I think we have our own view on, how broad it is. That's part of what makes an enterprise model-based, and how deep it is. How well are you using it? How much are you moving away from old modes of operating and using and focusing and solely relying on models? So I think it's breadth and depth is what helps us tell how model-based an enterprise is. To me, that kind of answers the question. But really, the context of our whole conversation is what's helpful about it, is understanding how broadly models can be applied, where models are useful outside of engineering, outside of product definition, and what it really means. Because I don't think models and modeling is not completely mature in many of these areas. It's evolving, it's improving, it's getting better. We're learning things and we're getting new techniques and tools.
I agree. Continual pursuit of excellence.
That's the aspirational part, right?
All right. Well, I think we are about out of time for today. So hopefully this has been educational and informative for everyone. Please, if you have questions about this, if you disagree, if you have additional inputs on what you think a model-based enterprise is, reach out, let us know. There's a place on our website you can send in comments. We want this to be a conversation.
Absolutely.
So we'd like to hear from you. And until next time, stay sharp.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Stay Sharp with Razorleaf. We appreciate you. If you have any questions or comments for our podcast team, or have an idea for a new topic for our team to cover in 2024, please send an email to podcast@razorleaf.com. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, stay sharp.